when people talk about race being a social construct, what they're talking about is like that is not something that is biological or just exists in nature. It's something that we as a society, or as a, what society, it's a social we created that. And what these particular lawyers are getting at, if we look at the law in American society, like how does that actually keep that fiction of race going, right? How does it
When you say
created?
fiction of race, what do you mean?
Well, that's what I mean. It's not real, right? Race isn't real. It only exists because we created it.
Yep. Are you recording on your end?
Hi, I'm Suzanne, and I'm a Christian. I've spent my entire life in what I call an echo chamber.
Oh my gosh.
I've just always been surrounded by people who look like me and think like me, and the world is so divisive. I just personally want to leave my echo chamber, and I want to get uncomfortable, and I want to sit down with people who have different belief systems than me and seek to understand their story. And I want to love them for who they are, where they are.
Of course.
If you had to give a 20-minute TED Talk right now, what would you be able to talk about nonstop on the spot?
Kendrick and Drake, probably.
Yeah. Okay, we've got to pause right there. First of all, is the beef over, or is it just never going to be over?
I think it's technically over.
Okay.
I think people are going to be very upset for a long time.
Yes. Who won the beef?
Kendrick won. That was really, really obvious.
100%. Let me ask you this. Do you like Drake? Like, are you a fan of Drake's at all?
I like some of his music. I don't dislike Drake.
Right.
I think he's corny, but his music is fine.
Okay. I personally like a lot of Drake's music, but Kendrick's just next level. His lyrics, the intelligence that he brings to his art form is like, you can't even compare the two.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Yeah, I think it's not close.
Today, we were talking with one of my dear friends, Jazz Boone. I worked with years ago. He used to be in sales, and today he's a very established and successful attorney in Nashville, Tennessee. And he and I both are people of faith and love Jesus, but have had two very different journeys. And so I want to explore his today, and I want you to come along with me. All right, help me. I didn't know Jazz when Jazz was a little boy. What was growing up like for Jazz? Ohio?
Yeah. No, Ohio was great. Grew up in Akron, Ohio. It was a great place. And
I've always thought of Ohio as just kind of like who wants to live there?
why?
I don't know. That's my perception.
I mean, there are a lot of cornfields. I grew up in an actual city, though. So
Okay. Gotcha.
there's a lot of people that lived in the city and the county. So it was great. I had a lot of really good friends that I grew up with. There were 3 sets of brothers in my neighborhood, so we spent a lot of time together. And I was there up through the end of middle school, and then we moved to South Carolina for high school. I enjoyed my high school friends. I did not like living in South Carolina.
Why?
It was hot. I didn't know anybody. It was terrible, and we lived in a trailer park for 4 years, so that was pretty terrible. So we just stayed
In
inside.
South Carolina?
Yeah.
Okay, time out. When you were growing up in Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
were you growing up, what type of neighborhood did you grow up in?
Like a typical Midwestern neighborhood.
Like biracial, like pretty racially diverse, or no?
Not super. I mean, there were definitely it wasn't just completely homogeneous, but it was it's like a nice neighborhood on the west side of Akron. There were a handful of Black families, a couple of Indian families, and Indian as in Asian Indians, and then maybe like a couple of Chinese families that were close by, because there was a store up the street that we'd always stop and get candy at.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So South Carolina, we're in a trailer park. What's the ethnic makeup of the trailer park?
That's probably almost all Black.
Okay.
Yeah, almost.
Okay. So how long did you guys live there?
I was there 4 years, and then as soon as I graduated high school and went to college, I never went back.
Never went back.
I mean, I went back to visit my family, but I didn't stay there like
Okay.
extended periods of time anymore.
Would you say you grew up poor or
No, I would
middle
say
class?
probably more like middle class. Like if we're trying to be like real,
But you only could afford 3 shirts.
yeah, probably
Okay.
had more than 3 shirts, but I like to wear the same ones over and over because they were the best ones.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. I always used to say, like when I was growing up, I'd say we were lower middle class.
yeah. I think that's probably accurate for
And
myself.
so, like, if all the kids were wearing tree torns, I would get the buddy version from Payless Shoes
Mhm.
or Walmart. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
we always
went
call
to
them buddy
ours
shoes.
is True Value or something like that.
Isn't
Was
that a
ours.
hardware store?
It was something like that. It was like, maybe it
Yeah.
was like Twin Value. I don't remember. Something in Ohio that we went to, or was
Yeah,
everything was
off-brand.
yeah. Or it was like Wilson athletic shirts instead of like a Nike shirt, right?
Yeah.
They had to get like a Nike shirt.
Yes, yes.
Things like that. Yeah, and then same thing. I remember I got was it Duck Head sweater? I
Dude.
thought it was like the best sweater of my life.
Wait, what?
Oh, I wore it that
That
at least
was
once
like
a week,
the
every
thing.
week. It got cold, yeah. And so I got a
Okay.
lot of it.
I love that for you. Did you grow up in church?
Yeah, I grew up Church
What
of Christ,
type of
actually.
Church of Christ?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's how I ended up at Lipscomb.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was your church upbringing mostly a Black attended Church of Christ, or was it?
Yeah, and when we lived in Akron, the first church we went to was more of a Black Church of Christ. Then we moved to a different one because my grandparents are both deaf, so they had like a sign language program.
Okay.
So we moved to that church, which was predominantly white. And then in South Carolina, it was a Black Church of Christ.
I have to ask this because, like, I grew up in the South. Like, Black churches is where you had all the music. Like, you guys didn't have any music. What was that like?
Just singing a cappella?
It feels anti-cultural.
It was fine.
Yeah?
It was fine.
That's just all you knew.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and it's sort of like drilled into your head, right? Like, you're not allowed to use music when you're in worship, or sorry, instruments in worship. So you just sort of were used to doing that on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, both sides of my family, my mom and dad both grew up Church of Christ.
Okay.
So I grew up going to VBS at Church of Christ. Like, I know COC. I just never put myself in the shoes of a Black person going to a COC because I see you guys as just music being such a part of your culture. So I don't know if that's okay to say or not.
You can still sing songs. It's still music.
Okay, that's fair. You talk about as part of your story, and you're welcome to share like anything like from college on up, but there was a point in your life where water started to boil in you. You may say it differently than that, but do you remember when that started?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you mean like water, like kind of my awareness of what's happening, that probably started. Well, I would say awareness. I would say more of a curiosity about things that are going on in the world. A little bit deeper probably was law school, like in 2011. So I think just not necessarily being exposed to new ideas, some stuff, you've already talked about, heard about, but I think hearing other people that you respect and their viewpoints that are different than yours, and then explaining why, or being in a place where you have to listen instead of sort of instantly fire back, was good because I think it prompted me to kind of listen and ask questions. Because, you're not always going to like change your mind on something, but typically if you're open to at least listen to people, it'll help form, I think, maybe stuff that you believe, and it could change, it could not. Or you could just come to a different place, So I think that process for me really kicked off probably when I started law school.
When you think back to law school, is there a specific professor that you have a memory of that being in that class was like, wait, what?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think in terms of, some historical bits that you don't know about, sure. But I think in terms of overall life. I think it's more so from my classmates,
Okay.
especially when you're talking about constitutional law and some really heavy subjects or even criminal law. And then people start talking about their experiences with, some of that subject matter or some of the hot button topics. And you have to listen to them.
I need an example.
I mean, the easy one is like abortion, right? Like people, you get to that in constitutional law and people start firing off all kinds of thoughts, and you're reading the actual law, at least the court opinions on it. So you're having a completely different view of what's happening. It's not the cultural arguments, I should say, like it's not that kind of world when you're reading that. You're reading something completely different about their judges or lawyers, whoever, are trying to figure out how can we really make this work for people. How do we make this work? What are the things that we're considering when we're going to rule on whether or not this is okay or not okay? And it makes you consider things from different angles, right?
Would you mind sharing, like, prior to going to law school, how did you feel about abortion? And did your opinion stay the same, or did it start to change based on the stories that you were hearing and the other perspectives?
Yeah. I would say probably before law school was like kind of the staunch, typical conservative Christian, which is like absolutely not, for no reason, it's all bad, right? Painting with a broad brush. But I think during that process, it didn't necessarily change my mind of like how I feel about it necessarily, but I was sort of like a little bit more empathetic or more understanding of why people have different views on it, and being more open to understand, like, how do we make this really work for women? I shouldn't say people, women, because they're the ones who are, it affects them. So that just sort of like gets you this place. Okay, I get it. Like, I respect my classmate. They said X, Y, and Z. I never thought about it like that before because we don't have those conversations, right? And kind of like what you're doing here, I don't have those conversations with anybody.
Right.
The conversations you would have on it are going to be the same. Everybody thinks exactly the same way on it, and you don't get the outside information.
Because you were in an echo chamber, just like I did.
Yeah, effectively, yeah.
Yeah. So honestly, it sounds like for you walked out of your echo chamber during law school.
Right.
And really started to hear different perspectives for the first time.
Right.
So there's being aware of things, and then there's developing a sense of anger, which anger as an emotion, it simply leads to, it's the only emotion of the 8 core emotions that actually drives change. And so if you're angry about something, like the unhealthy part of that would be rage, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're not talking about rage. We're talking about anger as in, I want something to be different. So do you remember a time where you went from awareness to more of an anger, like an injustice, a sense of injustice, and something's really wrong here?
You mean during law school or after?
Either way.
Whatever. It probably took a while. I think the law school experience just, and I'm not saying you only have to go to law school to learn how to think or to listen to other people. It just put me in a place where I had to do that for 3 years straight. So it's a little easier for me to say, well, this is when this started happening for me. I think after that, again, it's just taking that curiosity and asking more questions, trying to read things, trying to figure things out as best as possible. But I think, a lot of the shift for me was sort of right around the start of COVID, right? Because it was sort of obvious at that point, at least in the very beginning, when they're telling people to go home and like not come outside or whatever, protect yourself. My first thought was, yeah, it'd be a good idea if we had the universal healthcare right now, because this is going to be a disaster. Like, I didn't know, like, oh, this is gonna be really bad. It's just sort of, when they're talking about it, you get the sense that this could be pretty bad. I was visualizing that there are going to be lots and lots of people who are going to get really upset.
What kind of people?
White people.
Okay.
You just pulled it out of me.
No,
but I'm being honest.
No.
I'm being honest. I was like, this is going to be a problem. I said, because what he's saying is the right thing, but it's what people are taking is the wrong thing, of that this doesn't have an impact on me, or I don't need to curb something right now because, like, it's not going to affect me as much. I can go to the doctor. I have the means to do these things. It's not going to impact me.
So let me say this back to you. Tell me if this is what you're saying. Like Fauci's saying, everyone stay home, wear masks, blah, 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 blah. But we're really concerned about people of color. And you're thinking white people aren't going to want to follow all those rules because they think they're above it or they're okay.
I'll probably say no. I would say more like when he says like this demographic of people we are most concerned about, because I know what he's saying. He's saying we know that there are healthcare disparities out there based on race, based on income. And when you have something like this that is a major healthcare event, right? A pandemic, which again, I'm not an expert on this stuff. It's just sort of like critical thinking here. That people are going to look at that and say, oh, what he just said is this doesn't impact me. It just impacts those people. I'm not one of them, and I don't need to be worried about this. And I have the means to be okay because I can go to the doctor. And I go to the doctor.
So then why would they get riled up?
Because then it's like my lifestyle, right? Everybody had to kind of like take a breather because they didn't know exactly what was going on. I don't know what's right or wrong. I don't really care about all that. I'm just saying this is what happened. And so everybody's at home, and then all of a sudden you realize, well, I don't really want to be here. I got a job. I got this. I want to see my family. Maybe it's not that bad. Who knows? Whatever people are thinking is what they're thinking. But it seemed pretty clear that if nobody really wants to be home, like it's not like I wanted to be at home.
Yeah.
Not that I don't love my family. I just don't want to be confined, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's natural to feel that way. But I think once people thought, or at least got in their heads that this is not, I'm not going to be impacted by this or not as badly, then let me out of my house. Let me go do what I want. It's not me you have to worry about. It's these other people, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying like that's the only thing that was driving that. But when I heard that, I was like, that's just, there's nothing wrong with what he said. It just was like, it kind of peaked in me of like, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
We're going to have a problem.
I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I think there are a lot of white people who don't really believe that there really is that much of a problem when it comes to people of color, Black people getting the health insurance they need, getting the health care they need. I think a lot, again, I'm guessing, a lot of white people are like, this is America. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Anyone can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you respond to that?
It's a difficult response because I think to start with, it's not accurate, like by any stretch of the imagination, right? And I think there are lots of examples of this, but I think that idea of like, it's people living in their world, right? In their world, it's easy. I just go to the doctor. Or let's talk about, we can talk about voting rights. I just go to the DMV. I just do this other thing. I get this stuff. I'm at home. It's like in their world, they can't imagine that people do live very differently than that. Through no fault of their own. And sometimes it is their fault, but who's to know? The reality is people don't live like that. And so I think when a lot of people have lived in a world where, I won't say necessarily everything is easy, because I think that's fair, but where you take for granted all the things that you do are pretty simple for you, right? People say, well, just go get a job. And then we say, well, okay, that's great. You get a job, but then what if you can't afford a car? People say, well, just go buy a car. It's like, not everybody just goes and buys a car. The cars are actually kind of expensive. You got to have insurance. You got to go to the DMV. You got lots of things to do to make that effective for you, right? And then I think maybe it depends on where you live and like how that impacts, right? So let's say you live further outside of town, but your job's inside of town. Or even here in Nashville, we had a big, a few years ago, was a big transportation bill, right? Which there was a lot of excitement, and then it got shut down. And people said, well, what do we need that for? It's like, well, you might not need it. You drive in from Brentwood, from Franklin, from wherever, but there's a whole bunch of people who are maybe in their late teens, early 20s, who need public transportation to get to their jobs at coffee shops or the hotels or the bars or the restaurants, right? And, does it affect me paying 30, 40, 50 bucks to park downtown? It's annoying, but I can afford it. Whereas someone who's 21, who's making, I don't know, 10, 15 bucks an hour. I
Mhm.
have no idea. $30, to park their car for even a 6, 7, 8 hour
Yeah.
shift is 3 hours worth of work, maybe, or maybe it's 2 hours worth of work. It just doesn't matter. So it's like those things I think are the bigger issue, of that understanding outside of your world, things are different. And I do think, kind of in that same vein, right, of like the whole idea of like just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, as if people just go out there and if they just start doing stuff, they're just going to have money.
Mhm.
That's just not true.
Can we go back to the trailer park days?
Sure.
Did you ever witness anything in regards to your parents, if you look back, like some of the stuff you're talking about, did you ever witness them having struggles with dealing with the DMV, being able to afford a car, anything along those lines?
No, not my family. I don't think that. I think for us it was more of, a cool new pair of shoes comes out. I'm like, I'm never getting those shoes, right? Like that's not
Mhm.
going to happen. Or feeling like you don't have enough cool clothes to wear to school. That's not
Mhm.
going to happen. Or, I played soccer and I played travel ball, and I worked and I paid for that pretty much on my own, which was at the time, pretty expensive. It was like 5, 6, $700 just to play. And then I had to go buy, a pair of cleats.
Mhm.
No one wants to wear the $20 cleats. You got to get the good ones. Um, and so like all that came out of my pocket.
How old were you then?
I was a teenager, like 15, 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What type of work did you do to be able to afford
Working
it?
at Burger King in a movie theater,
Yeah.
the cool stuff.
The free movie tickets.
Yeah. Making like $5 an hour.
Oh my gosh. Let's back up. COVID. You start to experience, like, you have that moment where you see Fauci on TV and you realize, oh, stuff's about to happen.
Yeah.
What came next? Like, take me on that journey with you where you go from awareness to what I'm calling anger, feeling anger or a sense of injustice toward things.
Yeah, I don't think anything really popped off for me right away. Obviously everybody's upset about, do we stay home? Do we not? What do we, all those types of things are going on. I think what started really sort of like the turning the heat up was the Ahmaud Arbery killing, which, when you look at the scenes of where it happened, it was almost like out of a, 1990s, film about racism in the 60s. It was the Spanish moss in the trees, all that. And I think the Breonna Taylor episode was like, fall right on the heels of that. And then there was the Chris Cooper incident in New York in Central Park where he didn't die, but that was really terrifying. And then it was the George Floyd incident. And I think just sort of like, that's like too much all at once. But I think it was too much for almost everybody in the country, to be quite honest. But I think there was a lot of like this, like weird. And I think because we're all sitting in our house because of COVID, we're all just sitting there looking at these video images and hearing the story over and over and over again because we're all at home working. Not all, but a lot of us are. So I think that sort of kind of moving to the point of like what is, like, why are we, like, why does this keep happening? Like, why is this happening? Because at the time, like George Floyd, it was all, I got all these like text messages and calls. Like, people were trying to be sweet, but it was awkward. 'Cause it's like, oh, we respect you, man. I was like, what are we doing though? Like, why does this keep happening? And I think that's when you saw like a lot of people start pushing out, hey, like, here's some good books to read if you want to understand better, like why this keeps happening.
Yeah.
Like, why are we here? I think that started things. And then at the same time, it was like all of a sudden, and I'm kind of giggling, but it was a whole critical race theory thing popped up. And I saw mostly like conservative evangelical Christians just conflating that with Marxism. I was like, okay, like I know this is 100% wrong. So I want to figure out what this is, because every time, I'm sorry, but conservative Christians say Marxism or communism, it's like 99.9% of the time it's just completely false. Like, it's just, so I was like, I have to go look at this and figure it out. And I think when I dug into that, realizing there's a bunch of lawyers, a bunch of, minority lawyers, but particularly black lawyers who had all this like very well thought out critiques about racism in America, like what that looks like, how the law like creates that, sustains it, and what we can do, I was like, this here we're doing this thing again where you've got like these really accomplished people because they're not white. It's like what they're talking about is almost immediately bad, and because what they're talking about is the injustices of our society, you put this label Marxism on it so we can just ignore it.
Okay, a lot of white people like me know enough about the critical race theory to be dangerous. I don't even know if I know enough to be dangerous, right? I've heard evangelical Christians get upset about it. I don't even know what exactly it is.
Mm-hmm.
So will you unpack for me just a little bit, like how you kind of unpacked how it got started, but what actually is it being taught in the schools? How is that being done, or is that being done? Unpack that for me a little bit.
Yeah, I want to be careful because I'm not like an expert. Like
I understand.
I've read like probably half a dozen books on it, and so
I don't
far.
want to interview experts.
No, I'm just making sure because I don't want people to take this and run with it as if they want to fight about it. I would say if you ask me what my definition of critical race theory is I think it is a movement of legal scholars that are studying the intersection of race and law in America and how American law creates and sustains the fiction of race in American society, right? So that's a lot of words out. I mean, the gist of it is when people talk about race being a social construct, what they're talking about is like that is not something that is biological or just exists in nature. It's something that we as a society, or as this, what society, it's a social we created that. And what these particular lawyers are getting at now, it's expanded outside of that. That's where it started. But what they're talking about is like, if we look at the law in American society, like how does that actually keep that fiction of race going, right? How does it created?
When you say fiction of race, what do you mean?
Well, that's what I mean. It's not real, right? Race isn't real. It only exists because we created it, to justify, and it's a whole nother conversation, but it's created to justify greed at the end of the day, right? The greed's the real issue. Racism is just the tool to kind of justify that, right? Because if you
Well, I think, Jazz, what you're talking about is a very important thing. And you're talking about it as if you assume everyone who is within the sound of your voice understands what you mean.
mm-hmm.
And they don't. So when you make comments like race is fiction or, whatever, like I need you to unpack that a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because, and I want to keep pushing on this because I'm seeking to understand, but I also recognize that there's a lot of people who have never even wanted to seek to understand.
Right.
And I want them to have a curiosity about this so that their minds are open to even just consider things they've never considered before.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, maybe talk to me like I'm in 5th grade.
Well, I think the question, it's more of like, what's the question? The question is, if people don't understand, like, where does race come from? Right. That's the question people have to ask themselves. Where does this come from?
Racism or race?
Race. I mean, it's almost one and the same, but it's, and that's, I don't want to do this. You stop me because I will start going down a rabbit hole.
I think it's important.
Well, it's like, essentially, the argument is racism precedes the idea of race, right? Which sort of, it seems backwards. Race would probably be created first to be racism. But like, if you think about it, racism had to already exist if you wanted to create race. You had to already think people who didn't look like you were less than you to name it, right? Anyway, that's kind of beside the point. I think that's the question. Is like, you have to ask people, where does race come from? And if you can't answer that, and it's not because you're a bad person, it's just like people can't answer it because they probably have never thought about it, or they've never sort of dug into it a little bit. And that's fine, and that's normal. I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but I think that's what I mean when I say it's a fiction. It's like when you dig in, you start to understand that there is no again natural concept of race. There's no, like, people didn't categorize people based on those things, like their skin color, prior to this colonialization, and then trying to justify when you see this dehumanization of people. Like, how can we make sense of this? How can we as people say like this is okay. Well, the only way to do that is like you've got to put a label on a group of people to justify that, right? So that's when I say, if we're really going to talk about race, the underlying issue is greed. But when we talk about race when I say it's a fiction or a social construct, it's something that is made up. Like it's not, you can't just go out into the world and just say, oh, they're a different race. We do that now because that's what we've categorized everybody as. But we did that. Does that help some?
Yeah, is the issue that, it's not just that I see someone and I identify them as being black, right? It's not just that simple. Like when I make that determination, I'm putting them in a bucket that means a lot of different things, right?
It could be a lot of different things, but that even the category itself, it is not a natural category. Like maybe it's not the right way to say it, but the category of like men and women, generally speaking, again, we're not going to get into this whole gender, sex thing. I'm just saying as a general category. It's like you can look at a woman and a man and you know the difference just by looking at them, right? It's like you can categorize that differently. When you see a black man and a white man standing next to each other, they're not actually any different. Their skin colors are different. That's it. But that race itself is not like that black man and white man are not any different other than just the tone of their skin. You see what I'm saying?
That makes more sense to
Yeah.
me, the way you just said that. Because they could have the same exact job, the same exact paradigm they see the world through, etc. They just have different color skin.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Right.
I think
Well, I mean, yes, and I think I don't, again, it's not the perfect analogy or example, but like I think men and women are fundamentally different than each other, right? Biologically. Whereas like a black man and a white man are not biologically different. They just have different skin shades. It's like having different colored hair, right? So that's why I say it's more of it's not what I say. I mean, it's the truth. It's something that we made up to justify it, to put a category on it so that we understood. And so that's what I mean. It's like it's not real. It's only real because we made it real, and that's fine. I'm not one of these people who says we just need to ignore race and pretend like it doesn't exist. We don't live in that world. Like the world we live in, race is a real thing because we made it into a real thing. So we have to deal with it as it is and figure out how we're going to do this better moving forward rather than just sort of pretend like it doesn't exist and just hoping everybody gets on board with that. I mean, maybe at some point in the future, it just won't matter, but that's not the situation today.
what do you think, if you could name one thing, and it could be two things, what are one or two things the church should be doing that they're not doing to help with what you're talking about?
I would say the biggest thing that churches can do right now is I think there's a lot of people want like, well, we should go do X, Y, and Z. I think the biggest thing that churches can do is educate themselves on their actual history and American history and not to run away from those things. And I can't quote it perfectly or off right, but the paraphrase, I mean, Martin Luther King talked about this. He's like, and I'll say this about white churches specific or white people. He's like, they just refuse to educate themselves out of their ignorance. And what he's saying is like, you're not stupid. It's just like, you just don't go do the work. And I think that's the big deal is like, go read the books, go ask the questions, like do the work to understand what the issues are. Because I think throwing out money is great, but it's not going to fix it. Partnering with a diverse church, again, great. It's not going to fix it. It's like, you've got to understand why we're here. And then I think you can start developing action steps to kind of change what's going on, right? Because there's a lot of action, I think, with churches that is intended to be good and is good. But I think fundamentally we've got broken systems, and until we repair those systems or fix them or even completely revise them, you're not going to see what people want to see.
Let me ask you this. If you could, I want you to be brutally honest. If you look at how racism was taking place in our country back in the 60s, and you compare it to where we are today, I think a lot of people feel like we've come a long way. Um, how do you think we're doing as a country compared to the 1960s?
I mean, I think in one sense, yeah, we have come a long way, right? It's not the same uh ridiculousness is happening, right? In one sense. So I think that's good. I think the other, on the flip side, though, I mean, people are definitely trying to push us back that direction pretty significantly.
Can you give an example of
Well,
that?
I think, like I was saying, like the whole conversation around DEI is created to get people to kind of roll back those protections. That's all it is. It's not serious. It's not legitimate, and it's predicated on the idea that somehow, some way, trying to create a society that's more equitable, and more inclusive of everybody is bad. But you characterize it as like, well, this program is bad, and we got to attack that because then everything be based on merit. And it's like we've never had a society based on merit. Like we've never had that. Number one, but number two, DEI is not a program that says people aren't qualified so they just get jobs. Like that's not. Those are all characterizations that don't have any basis. But it sounds good to the right people and they get upset about it. But I think in terms of, and I maybe this is a good way to kind of talk about this, kind of post George Floyd, right? I think there's lots of people who had different reactions to that, but I think probably if I could boil down to maybe two groups of people and like what did people do? And I think you had a group of people who saw that and started asking themselves like, why are we here and how did we get here? And I need to understand this because I think this is not right. And some other people looked at it and said, that's really bad. I feel really upset. And then sort of moved on and we're kind of like still in the same place. And I think looking at today, it's like there's a lot of what's happening with after George Floyd and just politically, where it's more of an exposure of where people really are at, and people have not done the work or not been exposed to this information. And I think if you look at, from a political standpoint, what people in this administration are trying to do, which is to remove a lot of this information, that's the thing for me is that I don't think that in the last 60 years, people have really, we've not made a concerted effort to understand our history and what happened and where we came from, and then how to really resolve these issues. And I think that's probably been the biggest failure on our part is that we haven't really done that work.
So I think in wrapping this up, this is what I want to say to you. First of all, I really believe stories are sacred, and I'm honored, truly honored that you would come and to my home and sit down and share this stuff with me. And it didn't feel like you held anything back. And like that takes a lot of courage, and most people don't have that. So I want to thank you. And I think for me, I find myself going, this conversation felt like 5 minutes of what needs to be a 6-hour conversation, because we've been friends for a long time. We met up just a few weeks ago and hung out and talked about stuff. And yet in this short time today, I've already had new awareness of things that I feel like I've only got the surface of, just because we've only had a short time together, that I want to go much deeper on, for me personally. Not just because I'm a person of faith, but because I'm a human being. And I personally, I love people. And I find my life is richer when I've got people in my life with all different types of cultures and, ways of just living and expressing themselves and things like that. And so I personally am really grateful for this, because I know you're busy, but it makes me want to spend more time with you. And it makes me want to do a whole series with you and have a whole teaching series.
Oh, no, you don't want to do that.
I don't know, Jazz. I think what I love is you have these strong opinions, and you're very intentional about the way you educate yourself, and you're very principled, but you are humble and you are cool and you're fun and you're chill. And so like we can have this conversation, and like you kind of you do have every right to be like, bitch, let me tell you something. But you don't approach it that way. You don't. And I appreciate that, because I feel very ignorant right now.
But I look at this and say, there's stuff I didn't know. It's not like I just like, because I'm black, I just have all this information.
Yeah.
It's like, I literally had to go read stuff and figure this out, because I just looked at it and said, I don't understand what is going on. I don't get it.
Yeah.
And when this stuff started popping up, and thankfully there's a lot of people who are believers,
Yeah.
right? Who are authoring, like, maybe their faith doesn't look like some others, but like these are believers who are talking about a lot of this work, and it makes sense because there are so many things that I think all of us have either imbibed from our culture or been indoctrinated with at church. And I use that word purposely, indoctrinated, because some stuff is just not at all Christian, but we've been told it over and over again.
Yeah.
But they're trying to help people understand what's going on. And then it's interesting because in reading some of these books, you're like, I remember people talking about this. And I didn't get it, and they told me X, and then you read about it, and you're like, oh, that's how this thing came up, or this other thing came up. And then you start understanding maybe it's not as solid as like we all say it is. And it goes back to what I was saying to you before at law school. It wasn't like I changed my mind on everything because I went to law school. It was just more of, like sometimes I didn't change my mind at all. Sometimes I changed my mind completely. And sometimes I just went in at a different place because I felt like, you know what? I may have a very strong opinion about X, but someone I really respect has a different opinion. And I think there's some place that we can find that will work for all of us, even if it's not perfect. Because what's perfect for me is not for them, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, the last thing. I'm asking everyone to do this. Take a deep breath. You're at a wedding with Anna. There's a band playing and the dance floor is open. What's your like go-to dance move?
Move?
Yeah.
I don't have a go-to.
Jazz. Come on.
Oh no, maybe like some little two-step thing. But
What's a two-step thing?
just a little like.
Get up.
No, this will not happen.
Just do a
I
little.
told you. See, I have no hugs, and now we're up for dancing.
What's a two-step thing?
You just doing a little two-step.
Okay.
Just something really simple.
I like
right?
that.
That's it.
I can groove with that.
Yeah,
That's fine.
it's a goofball.
Wow. I'm in the process of reading multiple books that he is recommending, because it kind of started for me, like just being on this journey. What really kicked things off for me in our conversation was he made the comment, he used the phrase, the fiction of race. It has never occurred to me once that race is a fiction. We, as a society, created race, which ended up creating racism. They go hand in hand. And so I started reading the history of how racism started. You heard him reference colonialism. And so in our second interview, we talk about that. I love Jazz's humility, his humble approach to this conversation. He's so careful. Like, I'm not an expert. Just because I'm black doesn't mean I know everything. And it doesn't sound like he was raised by parents who were like, white people suck, whatever, which understandably a lot of black families grow up that way, and I don't even fault them for that, because the more I read, the more I want to know. Thank you for spending time with Jazz and I, and again, there is a part 2 because he and I needed to spend some more time together, and I'm really glad that we did. So please comment below. Ask questions, share your stories. How did you relate to Jazz's story or to things that he shared? You can do it anonymously if you want, but I really, we all want to hear from you.